that is my life now. It's like I have anxiety. This is how I live life with it. And I allow it to I make the choices so that I am in control versus allowing the anxiety to control me.
Welcome, everyone, to Breaking Bread, the podcast brought to you by Apostolic Christian Counseling and Family Services. Very glad to air the second part of my conversation with Nichole Suvar, as she has unpacked and shared her own personal testimony with anxiety, but also giving us a bit of a guide and a roadmap to walking with others who are anxious. Thanks for being on.
I think also a maintenance thing when it comes to phones and screens, it is, maybe some people feel like it's a broken record, but it is a very real thing that is feeding into anxiety. Yeah. And so that is something that I'm very intentional about. Our phones are not in the bedroom. I don't use it for an alarm clock. It is across the house, plugged in for the night, so that the very first thing, I wake up, I hit an alarm clock. It is an old fashioned thing. And the very first thing I'm doing is I'm doing the word before the world. And I need to make sure I'm in scripture. Sometimes it's just a psalm that I read while I sip some coffee. Sometimes I add in some worship music while I'm waiting for the coffee to brew. But it's just even if it's not full on Bible study first thing. I get up at 5 a.m. So that's not happening at 5 a.m. But being immersed in the word before I'm ever going into the world is very important.
And you're controlling the controllables in that way too, aren't you?
Yep.
I would think anxiety plays on a great deal of uncertainty. Anxiety has got to play upon risk, uncertainty, question, and it sounds to me like you have found health in controlling the controllables in the certainty of just even waking up and stepping into your life. I wonder how much health is brought by that.
Yeah. We all live with these stories in our minds about ourselves. And I feel like whenever we go to social media or anything on the internet, even if we're looking up something in the news cycle, those things will end up solidifying those stories that we have in our head, whether it be if the story we're believing in our head is, I'm not worthy, this comparison game of other people have it better than me, you are going to find something, and that just feeds into that anxiety. If you're concerned about money, it's not going to take much for you to get onto the news and hear something about something with the economics. And so if that is our first source that we are doing to verify our stories, then it's just going to feed into that anxiety versus these stories and lies or whatever we're believing in our head. If we are, the very first thing we're doing is scripture and we're going to the word, we're also going to find things, but we're going to find those things that are going to speak over it and be like, yes, maybe you are concerned about finances, but here's this, and here's the truth. And so I think that's so important that we are going into scripture. I cannot speak it enough. Yeah.
I love the practicality of it. And I think it really hits home. I am interested. You mentioned Gen Z, and we started the podcast. So let's go there a little bit. You talked about technology and they living and breathing. It's easy for you and I to have a practice of a real Bible in our hands. That's kind of home, We come home when we put away our technology. This is life as I know it. That is not the same for our kids.
Gen Z is that first generation that does not have a childhood that did not revolve around a screen. Because any millennial, at some point, they can go back a little bit of their child, at least somewhere in there. Well, they remember just running around the neighborhood and find a few kids to play kickball or riding bikes with a friend. And there was nothing that you had to get captured on a camera or anything. It was just interacting face to face with humans. And Gen Z is that first generation where they're, instead of play-based childhood, they now have a phone-based childhood. And that's just kind of rewired the brains a bit. For those now Gen Z and on, with that screen being part of their home, that's very interesting that you say it that way, because I feel like there's some truth to that. There's a few different things that come up. You've got like that social deprivation, like they being able to figure out and have a conversation face to face with people and not have to do it behind texting or even videos, like or things that can be curated. There's something about like just being able to understand in a social setting. You've got the sleep deprivation because now there's access to all these things much later into the night, and just like the blue light and what that can do with their sleep. There's that attention fragmentation that happens because, I mean, now we're all into like these short little videos. I mean, even like YouTube does YouTube shorts, and they're like less than 30 seconds. And I mean, I even noticed it in my own self, again, who's had a fully developed brain before I hit screens. But there's a time where if I'm checking email and I'll check it for just long enough to be like, oh, well, now I need to hop over here and do this. No, I don't. I could just stay right here in this thing. Our brain is wanting to like constantly switch.
Restless.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that last one is just that addiction piece because of the dopamine hits that happen when we get on those screens. And those four things, if we start to look like intentionally trying to address those with our kids, we can start kind of getting to the root of what's feeding that anxiety too.
Yeah, I think those four things are excellent. It's really heartbreaking to see our younger generation called the anxious generation. Per your own testimony, how anxiety gave way to depression.
Yeah.
Are we going to see a depressed generation?
Yeah. And that was something that was explained to me when I went and received my diagnosis, is that I had been anxious for so long that it started to deplete those parts of my brain that would release certain chemicals that would keep me out of that depressed mood. But because the anxiety kind of depleted all of those places, then the depression comes in. And so if we are allowing this anxiety just to kind of rule, eventually, like everything's going to crash.
Oh,
like
that's super interesting. So an anxious person is going to cope with their anxiety. I mean, you're going to cope with it. The question is how.
Yes.
And is that how sustainable and healthy in the long run?
Mm-hmm.
Often it is not either one of those things, which will lead to a deprived place. In depression. And that really amplifies some of these things that you've been saying, Nichole, this whole time, that if we learn to walk with our anxiety in a healthy way, with healthy inputs, you haven't given us a silver bullet on how to get rid of anxiety. I'm noticing, Nichole. I was kind of hoping that maybe you were gonna be the one.
Here's the secret. Yeah,
but you're really helping us to learn how to live with it.
Yes.
Am I right?
I think that's really what it is. Because I mean, I feel like that is my life now. It's like I have anxiety. This is how I live life with it. And I allow it to I make the choices so that I am in control versus allowing the anxiety to control me. And I think that the screens aren't going to go either. I think it's good to have some healthy conversations with your kids about screens. They probably have already heard some of it, but because that desire to have that thing is going to be very strong. And reality is it's just how life is. Like, phones are needed for so much stuff. There's some things you could take off the phone, but so much of just the communication and work is related to having these. So to get rid of them altogether, I don't think that's the feasible way, but helping them be able to understand how they control the tool that's in their hands versus allow that tool to control them. And then giving them, just these different practical resources, practical ways to live with it.
You know, you can maybe look at the upside here, Nichole, if this is an upside. But we almost have to train and introduce things to our children at a younger age.
Yes.
Let me give you an example. I never thought through identity. Until I was like 35.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, got along fine without ever really thinking about it's a huge thing. I need to think through it. but I'm finding conversations about identity happening in the teens, in the 20s, right? Like in early teens.
Yes.
At way earlier, but necessarily. So it's almost maybe a call to present Jesus in a beautifully compelling way. He has got to be a part of our living. He always has been, but at younger and younger ages. Anyway, now I'm kind of going off, but anyway.
I like that. Yeah. I was taking what you were saying. Yeah. So I think that, again, thinking about our teens and their phones, like I said, a few of those things earlier that it can do to them when I said that, as far as like the sleep deprivation, that fragmentation of attention, a few other things that can happen. And then I'll give some here's some things that we can help counteract.
Yeah,
so,
great.
There's like this phenomenon with like this fear of failure. I don't know if you've noticed, but there's not every kid is getting their driver's license right at 16 anymore.
Yeah.
And there's this pressure they now have because they see so much of other people's lives on camera and on view, and they are very afraid to fail. And so there's a lot less things that are being attempted, even things that aren't like super hard. They just don't even want to try them. And so that one of those things would be getting a driver's license. That's kind of a simple one that you can see. There's also that lack of purpose.
I just want to make a comment on that. I think you're absolutely right. Speaking of YouTube shorts, they see the best of everything, right? I mean, we're a long ways away of being a shining star in a class of 30. You know what I'm saying? Yes. Now we're in a class of 8 billion, and hey, you know what? I can't shoot 3-pointers like he can, and I can't play the piano like this one can. Check this out. And I can't do that. So there is like this, we see the best of everything.
Yeah. And what we see is like this person, it maybe took them 5 years to get to this point where it looks this good, but we're seeing that day of the 5 years. And we're looking at our day one and thinking that we're comparing the two, and that's not fair at all. And so instead of like, we have this pressure that they have to present everything that's good and great. And if I can't, well, then I just won't. I'll just, won't try. Yeah.
I interrupted you. You were going to say something else.
Yeah. The other one I was going to say was this lack of purpose. Social media has driven deep into our brains the thought that we are the most important when our purpose is just ourselves. And it's like of the selfies, and we post for likes and shares. And so we feel empty. Like eventually we're going to come to the end of that, because it's just so much about ourselves versus living outside of ourselves for a purpose other than ourselves. Like that is all social media is me.
Yeah.
We think that it isn't, because we're looking at other people's things, but the purpose that you're on there is about yourself, putting yourself forward. It's, and any time that our purpose is within our own selves, like we're going to come up empty.
There's a wealth, I think, of wisdom in that, Nichole, and I think you're right on, and furthers the point of what needs to accompany our young people in the lives that they live today. And this idea of others, which is the great commandment of loving God and loving others, I mean, is so practical and so helpful to our human health, which is another fascinating concept that, God's principles they play out true every single time.
Imagine that. Yes, I know that is something that when I am starting to feel low, like I feel like the depression is coming on, or even when I'm having anxious days, is that I need to look for someone else to help, because we suddenly stop just ruminating on whatever it is about ourselves and we start thinking about another person. It's just, there's a reason why Jesus says it in scripture, because he knows that it helps us also. Yeah. And then one other thing I wanted to mention was this false sense of accomplishment, like that, especially with video games, is because you gotta beat this level, or if you've got this little game where you have to build a little tower and you have to get so many army, and you check this list off and you're like, yeah, I did it. But in reality, you've done absolutely nothing.
Okay. So Nichole, nothing makes your point better. And this everybody who's played a video game, so I'll speak from experience, is doing something great on a video game and then trying to explain that to somebody else. It always falls flat, unless you're a geek in the same game. But right. Typically, if you go to mom or dad and try to explain to them how awesome you just did at that level, they're going to look at you like, "What are you talking about?" And anyway. Funny.
And they're going to wonder if you did the laundry and why your room is still a mess. So when you have this like false sense of accomplishment, then you move into real life and actually you haven't really accomplished anything. And then it falls back on that like lack of purpose. And so they just kind of all feed off each other. So I think that what I have found that helps counterbalance some of those things, I mentioned earlier about that validating over accommodating. If you've got someone who's very anxious and so they want to avoid doing things, like there's something actually about acknowledging how it makes you feel, but then having the courage to just go do it. You might fall flat on your face, but what you're doing is you're building these thought patterns in your mind that you are able to do something. Because there's something about like, if you're anxious about, doing a thing and you tell yourself, well, I can't do it. And so that your mind is like, okay, I cannot accomplish this. I cannot do this. And you start putting that into other parts of your life. But if you decide to go and tackle a hard thing, and even if it wasn't 100%, you've still done it. And your body and your brain communicate the fact that like, I am capable of this hard thing. And then there's going to be another hard thing that comes along that you could go back and be like, listen, I tried that before. And I lived through it. So I got to do this hard thing here. So just being able to validate with someone that, yes, it's okay to feel anxious about this thing, but we are not going to avoid it. We're going to try to do the hard thing.
Here's what was fresh and what I really liked about what you said. If there was an anxiety about speaking and so you could just like never do it, or a person steps into that and tries it, and maybe according to their metric, they failed at it. No, actually, they stepped into a fear. That's success. Yeah. So I think what I heard you say there is whenever you step into anxiety and not recoil from it, it's a success regardless of the outcome. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. It starts making these new roads in your brain that you are capable. Like the anxiety is not the one that has the final say. Yeah, so I think with teens, when we talk about like even video games or if they're getting on their phone just to scroll, teens do a really good job of numbing out. I think that adults, it's not just a teen thing, like adults too, we just want to like kind of dissociate a little bit and not really think about everything that's going through the day. So we just want to numb out and not think about it. And so, but that's not necessarily a healthy way to go through life in general, or even just to think through things that have been like, maybe you did have a hard day, but just dissociating isn't always the best route to go. So I have like the 3 words to kind of help your kids with is first to recognize, like help them be able to start being in tune to their body, to notice those different signals that they experience with the different emotions. It's kind of like a check engine light. Like how are you feeling in your body when you're feeling anxious? So that when they start getting those feelings again, they're like, okay, there's something that's making me anxious. And they can start following and going down that road to figure out, is it actually something? Or is it because I've been scrolling for the last 35 minutes and now I feel terrible about myself because everybody else has it figured out and I don't?
So really knowing yourself.
Yeah, it is. It's giving and helping our teens learn that. And like you had said, I think we're like having to help them learn earlier in life, which I don't think in that way, that's not bad for us to know ourselves. And I think like once we start recognizing those different things in our body, then starting to regulate and understanding like some of those things I mentioned earlier that starts communicating to our body that we are safe. Just different calming strategies to slow down that nervous system. Sometimes it involves just even getting outside There's something about being outside in God's creation that just reminds us that he has everything in control. I think there's something beautiful about being reminded that we're a very tiny, small thing in this giant world, but yet we're still cared for.
Yeah.
And he still knows us and loves us. And we get that when we're outside.
Yeah.
If we're really being mindful about what we're seeing and doing. Being around and having like face-to-face conversation with people that can kind of help start regulating our systems. They found that having face-to-face conversations with a friend can help lower the cortisol in our bodies and help increase that oxytocin, that those feel-good hormones, just by having a 15-minute face-to-face conversation. And then that last one is repair. And that's like helping them take ownership of what they do that feeds into that anxiety and being able to identify some of those things, and that if there's maybe any relational work that needs to be done between them and some other people, or if it's just phone use that they need to figure out, or if it's some other bad habit, being able to like identify and then being intentional in taking those steps to repair it.
I love those. And then again, I mean, speak of the optimism here, the hope, is that perhaps a generation is going to be learning these practices, learning themselves early. It's only going to prepare them for the future, which I think is really exciting. I'm dead set on belief, because I can't live with any other reality, but I'm dead set on the belief that God is going to use what our young people are dealing with to only bring about it for good and for a stronger church in the future. I think is fun to think about, and I think we have every right to believe so.
Yeah. So I think that's something that we can speak into those people that are anxious. And I know that like I said, for years, people would just say, pray more and read the Bible more. And that is a component, but I think so important that when we have people who are anxious, that we can introduce them to Jesus. Because there is a part of my anxiety that is alleviated when Jesus is in the picture. There's like that generalized anxiety disorder. That's a thing, just kind of like diabetes and heart disease. And like those are diagnoses that I could still walk alongside Jesus with. And so this anxious generation, we can introduce them to Jesus, like the true peace. And I think that, that kind of speaks with that hope that you have, that you spoke about.
It's amazing. Nichole, I think really appreciate both the story you shared and your own experience, as well as helping us stepping into the anxiety that our children or young people have. I know that intentionality is an important term to you. And I want you to speak to intentionality, what that means to you as it concerns living well.
Yeah. So, once I had that diagnosis and I really started down that road, I liked how you said it was like the exit ramp, on ramp. When I started down that road of healing, I really dug into learning all that I could about living with anxiety. And one thing I found just in my daily life that I was kind of already doing, and I didn't realize that was kind of like my coping of sorts, was being intentional. I kind of have mentioned that word throughout this at some point, but just the intentionality that we need to have for our mental wellness. I think just like with physical health, we can't go to the gym once and we're like, hey, we're good. I am in shape. Like we need to be intentional every day with our health to keep our bodies physically healthy, but also being intentional with mental health choices every day so that we have healthy mental capacity. One thing that I started noticing was there were like 7 different areas in life that if I would just do small things every day, it would kind of help. It would be another way of helping me be in control of anxiety instead of anxiety in control of me. So the 7 areas would be the heart. So most of all, just like, where am I at with Jesus and my walk with him? Our thoughts, not letting those thoughts control us, not believing everything that I think. Money, having healthy discussions around money and being good stewards, being generous with what we have. Relationships, our home, just how we care for it and how we open it up to others. Our physical health, there's very much a component between being physically healthy and being mentally well. There is that component there. So just doing what we're able to in small little ways to add to our physical health. And then that last one is just being intentional with our time and just being thoughtful with how we are spending it. So I found that when I use those 7 different areas, if I'm just each day, not doing all 7 of them, but if I'm feeling like something's just a little out of balance, I'll just kind of run through that list to be like, is there something here that I need to address? And just being intentional, making using a small moment to address one of those areas.
Nichole, thanks. Thanks for being on. Thanks for sharing your experience as well as your wisdom on this really, really important topic. Very, very grateful. Thank you.
Yeah, this has been great. I've loved this conversation.
Thanks each one for our listeners for being on. I know that you've been blessed, as I have been blessed by Nichole's commentary on anxiety. We wish you the Lord's blessing as we go forward. Goodbye.